Hey guys! Tonight we're sneaking into a story that feels both grand and secretive, like a hidden garden behind high palace walls where moonlight spills over stone and something curious waits among the leaves. You probably won't survive this one, though only in the sense that you'll be sound asleep long before we reach the end. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you truly enjoy what I do here. And if you're still awake by the time we finish, drop a comment with your location and the local time. There's something oddly comforting about knowing who else is out there drifting into dreams together. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. The palace looms behind you, its stone walls softened by creeping vines, and the hush of midnight air. You slip through an iron gate, half rusted, half enchanted, the kind that creaks like it's auditioning for a ghost story, but decides against it at the last moment. Inside, the garden unfolds in layers, marble paths lined with moss, rose bushes heavy with dew, and at the very center, a princess, kneeling in the dirt, her gown tucked up so she can dig with bare hands. Already you sense this isn't one of those glass slipper princesses. No ball gowns, no glass footwear, no fairy godmother on speed dial. Just soil under her nails and the calm focus of someone who finds joy in coaxing things to grow. A cool breeze drifts past, carrying the smell of lavender and mint, and you hear the distant murmur of the palace kitchens, pots clanging, a baker sighing, maybe a midnight snack being burned beyond recognition. Funny how fairy tale kingdoms always pretend nobody eats except at banquets. This princess, though, is different. She gardens in the quiet hours, not because she needs cucumbers for royal salads, but because her heart insists there's magic buried in the earth. Historically, the idea of royal gardens has always carried more than simple decoration. Versailles, for instance, wasn't just a lawn with flowers. It was an entire political statement. The French kings used their gardens as symbols of order over nature, proof they could command even the seasons. Folklorists, though, have long debated whether the earliest fairy tale gardens were meant as places of peace or traps of temptation. Was Eden a sanctuary or a setup? Scholars still argue about it over tea that probably goes cold before they agree. You kneel beside her, brushing dirt from your knees, and she smiles, a quick mischievous smile, like she knows you're not supposed to be here but isn't about to tell. Around you, lanterns hang from tree branches, glowing just enough to reveal ivy-clad statues of lions and griffins. Their faces look suspiciously judgmental, the way statues often do, as though they're tired of being urinated on by pigeons. The princess hums as she works, a tune that might be lullaby, might be spell. Somewhere in the distance, a clock tower tolls midnight, though you suspect the bell ringer is half asleep and missing every other strike. The sound doesn't matter. What matters is the rhythm of spade in soil, roots stretching like fingers in the dark, and the sense that this garden isn't just alive, it's listening. In old European folk tales, gardens were often thresholds, liminal places, where the human and the mythical overlapped. One curious tidbit, in certain Celtic stories, walking into a sacred grove at the wrong time of night meant you might not walk back out for 100 years. Time had a habit of skipping when trees got involved. Was that a metaphor for naps or a genuine fear of fae abduction? No one can quite agree. A cat slips from behind a hedge, its fur striped silver in the lantern glow. It stretches, yawns dramatically, then glances at you like it knows you don't belong but is too polite to file a report. Cats in fairy tales are rarely just cats. Sometimes they're messengers, sometimes tricksters, and sometimes they're just there to cough up prophetic hairballs.
The princess wipes her hands on her dress, unconcerned about stains, and gestures for you to follow deeper into the maze of hedges. Each step brings new scents: sage, thyme, honeysuckle, and a quiet chorus of night insects performing their sleepy orchestra. You realize, with a hint of unease, that the garden feels bigger than it should be, like someone took a regular palace courtyard, stretched it on the loom of imagination, and decided, yep, this will now contain forests, fountains, and possibly a few surprises that pay rent late. Your eyelids grow heavier with each step, not from exhaustion, but from the weight of so much calm detail. Even the statues seem to relax, their frowns softening under moonlight. You can almost hear the garden whisper, "Stay, rest, there's more to see, but no rush." And so you do. You wander forward with the princess, deeper into her quiet kingdom, unaware that tonight seeds will bloom into something more than flowers.
The soil still clings to your hands as you wander further into the courtyard, and the princess cradles something delicate in her palms. She unfolds her fingers slowly, like she's revealing a secret, and there in the cup of her hand are seeds, though not the kind you'd recognize. They shimmer faintly, as if starlight decided it was tired of being sky furniture and moved into the garden. Each seed looks different. One shaped like a teardrop, another like a spiral seashell, and a third that seems to glow faintly blue. She kneels again, her gown pooling around her, and presses a seed into the soil. The ground doesn't resist. It sighs, at least that's what it feels like, welcoming the tiny thing into its depths. You swear you see the soil shift in a way that dirt is definitely not supposed to move, almost as though invisible fingers were helping tuck the seed in for bed. You try not to make a face, because no one likes a judgmental guest in a magical garden. The princess glances at you and says softly, "These aren't ordinary seeds. They were given by travelers from lands far away." Her tone is calm, but you can tell she's pleased you're here to witness this. Fairy tales often pretend miracles happen when no one's looking, but maybe some miracles actually want an audience. It's worth remembering that seeds in old folklore often carried meaning far beyond farming. In ancient Greek tales, pomegranate seeds bound Persephone to the underworld, changing the rhythm of seasons forever. In Norse stories, ash seeds were sometimes thought to be fragments of Yggdrasil itself, carrying echoes of the world tree. And here's a quirky tidbit: some medieval monks believed certain beans could whisper during harvest if you listened closely enough. Imagine being the monk assigned to bean duty, crouched in a field like, "Shh, everyone, the beans are talking again." Scholars can't quite agree if those accounts were metaphors or just badly documented naps in the sun. The princess presses another seed into the ground, this one by a stone fountain. You lean in, curious, and the seed flares briefly like a firefly before sinking beneath the soil. For a moment, you expect something dramatic, maybe a tree bursting skyward in seconds, maybe vines lassoing you like you're the villain in a poorly rehearsed play. Instead, the soil goes quiet again. Nothing moves. Nothing sprouts. Just silence. And yet, the silence feels full, like the air is waiting. That's the thing about magical gardens. They're never in a hurry. If you've ever tried to watch grass grow, you know the frustration. Now imagine doing it with the pressure of mythical creatures possibly showing up at any moment. The princess laughs gently at your impatience, brushing dirt from her fingers. These will wake when they're ready, not when we demand it. A very gardening thing to say, though she delivers it with a kind of wisdom that suggests she's had this conversation with seeds before and lost every argument. You look around and notice little markers sticking out of the soil, smooth stones painted with tiny runes. Each one probably keeps track of which seed rests below. It reminds you of modern garden labels, except instead of tomatoes and dill, these might read things like phoenix feather plant, or don't water after midnight unless you want regrets. Night deepens as you walk between the rows, lantern light spilling across patches of earth waiting to bloom. You catch yourself wondering if you'd be able to plant such seeds, or if you'd mess it up, like overwatering a cactus until it looks more like soup than plant. Folklorists often debate the symbolism of planting in fairy tales.
Some argue seeds represent promises, others claim they're metaphors for fate, and a few think the whole thing was just propaganda from agricultural societies who really wanted everyone to stop eating their grain before planting season. No consensus exists, of course, but that's part of the fun. Fairy tales never hand you the answers. They hand you a mystery wrapped in a little dirt. The princess sets the last shimmering seed into the ground, pats the soil like she's tucking in a child, and leans back with a sigh of contentment. Fireflies drift through the hedges, their light echoing the faint glow of the seeds. You notice that the air has shifted, quieter, denser, as though the garden itself just inhaled deeply and is now waiting to exhale. You crouch closer, trying to catch the faint hum rising from beneath the soil. Maybe it's your imagination. Maybe it's the seeds singing very faintly, like lullabies meant for roots. You're not sure whether to be amazed or unnerved. Then again, in a fairy tale, those feelings are usually the same thing. The princess dusts her hands, smiles, and says, "Now we wait. Something, or someone, will answer." And though she doesn't explain what that means, you sense the promise of company lingering just beyond the lantern glow.
You don't wait long. The garden has that uncanny talent for knowing when you've nearly lost patience, then delivering a surprise just to keep things interesting. From the far end of the path, past the ivy-draped fountain, a soft rustle breaks the stillness. At first you think it's the wind, but no breeze moves. The leaves shiver anyway. And then, with a grace that makes your breath catch, a deer steps into the lantern light. Except it's not any ordinary deer. Its coat gleams like liquid moonlight, silver that shifts and flickers with every movement. The antlers stretch tall, polished like ivory, and you swear faint sparks drip from their tips, as though someone strung constellations along the branches. The animal pauses, looks directly at you, and bows its head. Not a casual dip, like a deer might make to graze, but a formal gesture, as if you've stumbled into a royal introduction you didn't dress properly for. The princess smiles knowingly. "Our first guest," she whispers. And sure enough, the deer pads closer, hooves making no sound on the stone. It bends its neck toward the soil, where the first seed was planted, and breathes a slow stream of mist. The mist curls like incense, seeping into the ground. You lean in, ready for a magical explosion, maybe vines rocketing skyward, or a tree sprouting so fast you'd need a time-lapse camera just to keep up. Instead, a single sprout pushes delicately through the dirt. No fireworks, no drama, just life, gentle and unhurried. In European folklore, deer often symbolized purity and the link between human and divine realms. The white stag, for example, appears in both Celtic and Arthurian tales, always leading hunters or knights into mysterious adventures. Scholars still argue whether the stag is meant as a guide, a trickster, or simply an excuse for medieval authors to get their characters lost in a forest for 50 pages. A quirky tidbit: some legends say silver antler deer were guardians of treasure, but historians can't decide whether the treasure was actual gold or just wisdom about not getting trampled by antlers. The silver deer watches the sprout tremble upright, then looks back at you. Its eyes reflect lantern light, but they also seem to hold 1,000 autumn forests inside them. You feel both judged and invited, like the deer has decided you're acceptable company, but only if you promise not to make bad puns. Which is tough, because you're already thinking, I guess I'll have to fawn over this moment. But you keep that to yourself. The princess strokes the deer's neck, her fingers disappearing into its luminous coat like ripples in water. She doesn't look surprised to see it here, which makes you wonder if this isn't the first midnight visitor she's entertained. Maybe the seeds don't just grow plants. Maybe they're invitations, sent out like handwritten notes to creatures of story. Dinner at my garden, midnight sharp, RSVP with mystical entrance. The deer shifts slightly, lowering itself to the ground in a posture that could only be called deliberate. It tucks its legs neatly beneath its body and settles at the fountain's edge, like it's not only a guest, but also a guardian. The sprout it breathed upon seems to glow faintly now, leaves tipped in silver. If plants could wink, this one just did. Folklorists often puzzle over why animals in these old tales always arrive just when they're needed. Was it allegory for the natural world guiding humanity? Or was it just a way for storytellers to keep audiences entertained when the plot was otherwise crawling along at snail speed? No one's certain, but the presence of the deer here feels purposeful, like part of a ritual you've only just been invited to. The princess settles beside the creature, leaning against its warm flank, and gestures for you to sit too. At first you hesitate, because sitting next to a luminous deer feels like a weird breach of etiquette, but then you lower yourself onto the grass. Surprisingly, the deer smells faintly of rosemary, not wild musk. Either that or your nose is still full of the herb garden. For a while, the three of you sit together in silence. The fountain murmurs. Fireflies drift lazily. The sprout grows an inch taller, slow but steady. It's the kind of moment that makes time feel like it's holding its breath. Then, with a blink that's almost too human, the deer turns back to you. There's no sound from its mouth, but the message arrives clear anyway, like thoughts gently set down in your mind. The garden wakes. More will come. The princess nods in agreement, as though she heard the same thing. She doesn't seem surprised. You, on the other hand, are still deciding whether telepathic deer are comforting or terrifying. Probably a bit of both.
The silence doesn't last long. A flutter of wings stirs the still air, faint at first, like paper rustling, then stronger, a burst of color flashing through the lantern glow. You tilt your head upward, half expecting a regular owl or dove. Instead, a cluster of birds swoops into the garden, each one painted in impossible colors. Wings of sapphire, emerald, and flame orange, feathers glimmering as if they've stolen their palette straight from a jeweler's case. They circle overhead before descending in delicate spirals, landing on branches and hedges, with all the ceremony of a royal court arriving fashionably late. One perches right on the fountain's rim, cocking its head at the deer, clearly unbothered by the glowing antlers. Another hops down onto the princess's arm, its claws light as embroidery pins. Instead of singing immediately, they wait, blinking at one another like musicians gathering before a performance. And then, music. Not shrill, not sharp, soft and melodic, more lullaby than songbird chatter. The notes weave together like threads, filling the air with harmony that vibrates through your chest. You think of cathedral choirs, except this choir doesn't care about walls or sermons. Their song seems designed for moonlight, soil, and whatever seeds are listening below. In folklore, birds were often messengers between worlds. In Greek myth, Zeus sometimes appeared as an eagle, while ravens carried Odin's knowledge across the 9 realms. And here's a quirky tidbit. Medieval Europeans believed that hearing a nightingale could cure melancholy, basically the original put on a playlist to fix your mood. Scholars still bicker about whether specific bird songs in myths symbolized actual species, or if storytellers just made up whatever bird suited the plot. One of the jeweled birds flutters down to the new sprout by the deer's hoofs. It tilts its head, taps the leaves with its beak, and somehow the sprout straightens, stretching taller as though encouraged. You could swear the plant gives a shiver of delight, the way people shiver when someone runs a finger down their spine, except, less creepy. The princess laughs softly. They always know how to coax the shy ones. Her voice is warm, almost proud, as though these birds are her old friends. She strokes the feathers of the one on her arm, and it lets out a note so sweet you feel your eyes sting, which is annoying. You didn't sign up to cry over bird songs tonight. The deer lifts its head, clearly approving, though you detect the faint smugness of someone who was first on the guest list. You half expect the antlers to glow brighter just to reassert dominance, like an insecure Wi-Fi router blinking for attention. The birds, meanwhile, go about their work. Some nestle into vines, trilling softly. Others flit to the soil, where more seeds lie buried, scattering faint sparks of light with their wing beats. The sparks sink into the ground, and you notice subtle shifts. A leaf here, a bud there. Nothing dramatic, but enough to prove the seeds are listening. You lean back on your elbows, letting the song wash over you. The notes are oddly familiar, not because you've heard them before, but because they sound like something you always wanted to hear, like a lullaby you forgot but your bones remembered. It's both comforting and strange, like realizing your favorite childhood snack still exists, but is sold under a weird new brand name. The princess tilts her head, clearly attuned to every note. "The garden attracts who it needs," she says, her voice almost lost beneath the harmony. "The deer bring strength. The birds bring voice. Each gift wakes something different." It's the kind of line that would sound unbearably cryptic in daylight, but in this midnight garden, with stars overhead and jeweled-winged birds singing into the soil, it makes perfect sense. You don't question it. You just listen. Folklorists often argue whether these animal appearances in stories were meant literally or symbolically. Did villagers truly believe a jeweled bird could show up at midnight to coax plants awake? Or were these tales shorthand for how music, human or natural, encourages growth? The debate never really ends, which is fitting. A good fairy tale isn't supposed to close all doors. It's supposed to leave at least one ajar, just wide enough for a bird to slip through. The song tapers off slowly, each note softer, until the garden falls into silence again. Not empty silence, though, full, resonant silence. You realize you'd been holding your breath, and when you exhale, it feels like something in your chest has loosened. The birds settle into their places among the branches, eyes half-lidded, feathers puffed against the night chill. A hush settles in, waiting for the next arrival. And you know, without needing to be told, that more is coming. The stillness lingers only a heartbeat before the fountain gurgles louder, like it just cleared its throat. You glance toward it, expecting maybe a frog or a ripple. What you get instead is the unmistakable sound of claws tapping stone. Tiny, deliberate, like the world's most confident lizard auditioning for a marching band. Out from behind the fountain slinks a dragonling. Not the kind of fire-breathing beast bards wrote epic warnings about. No scorched villages, no terrified peasants. This one is barely the size of a spaniel, wings folded awkwardly against its body like it hasn't figured out where to put them yet. Its scales shimmer between green and bronze, catching lantern light like hammered copper. When it yawns, a curl of smoke escapes, but it's the lazy sort of smoke you'd see after blowing out a candle, not the "oops, I lit the drapes on fire" kind. The princess grins, her eyes bright. "Huh? Late as usual," she teases, and the dragonling lets out a sound somewhere between a squeak and a snort, clearly offended. You get the sense this is a regular guest in the garden, the kind who shows up unfashionably late but still expects applause. In folklore, dragons were rarely one-size-fits-all. In Europe, they often hoarded gold in guarded caves. In Asia, they brought rain and fortune. And in some lesser-known Norse fragments, tiny dragons were said to live in springs, warming the water so that weary travelers could bathe in comfort. Scholars still argue if that was allegory, or if someone genuinely saw steam rise from a pond and thought, "Yep, pocket dragon." The dragonling pads over to the sprout the deer and birds have been coaxing. It sniffs once, curls its body around the base, and sighs.
A wave of warmth ripples through the soil, the kind of gentle heat that reminds you of bread fresh from the oven. The sprout responds instantly, stretching taller, its leaves unfurling with soft silver edges. Clearly, magical horticulture is a team effort. You can't help it. You laugh, the sound slipping out before you can smother it. "It's basically a garden heater," you murmur. The dragonling swivels its head to glare at you, amber eyes narrowing like you just insulted its entire ancestry. Then, to drive the point home, it huffs a tiny puff of flame at your shoe. Not enough to burn, but enough to make you reconsider your jokes. The princess giggles behind her hand, trying and failing to look diplomatic. The deer raises its head, unimpressed, while the jeweled birds trill notes that sound suspiciously like laughter. The garden is turning into a midnight comedy club, and you're clearly the punchline. Still, you notice the comfort of the warmth seeping outward. The dragonling's body heat takes the night chill from the air, the kind of cozy shift that makes your shoulders loosen and your eyelids droop. It curls tighter, tail flicking lazily, and the fountain's surface reflects its glow so the water looks like liquid firelight. Folklorists disagree on whether dragons were feared or revered in fairy tales. Some claim they were always villains, obstacles for knights to prove themselves. Others argue they were guardians, protectors of sacred treasures, even teachers in disguise. A curious tidbit, in certain Eastern European folk tales, villagers would leave out bowls of milk for dragons, the same way we leave saucers for cats. Apparently, dragons enjoy dairy, though historians suspect that's less fact and more someone confusing lizards with livestock. The princess strokes the dragonling's head, unafraid, and it hums, a deep, vibrating sound that rattles in your bones like a purring furnace. You think of cats again, except this one could flambe your furniture if it sneezed wrong. It nestles into her lap, smoke curling softly around her. You glance around the garden, realizing how odd this company looks. A glowing stag, jeweled birds, a sleepy dragon, and a princess with dirt under her nails. And yet, somehow, the scene feels balanced, as though each piece belongs exactly where it is. The seeds have called, and the garden is answering. Your thoughts drift as the warmth deepens, the night thick with quiet breathing and faint birdsong. You almost forget there's a world outside these walls. And then, as though sensing your near surrender to drowsiness, the princess says, "Stay awake a little longer. There are more stories still waiting to arrive."
The dragonling's purr still hums in the air when you hear the faint scrape of a rake against stone. It's so ordinary a sound that at first you assume one of the palace servants has wandered into the wrong story. But then, through an arch of ivy, an old man appears, stooped, slow, yet carrying himself with the easy familiarity of someone who belongs here more than the statues do. His clothes are patched and frayed, the kind you'd expect from a gardener who values utility over pageantry. A straw hat droops over his brow, casting his eyes into shadow, but when he looks up, his smile is soft and knowing. He doesn't bow to the princess, he just nods, as if greeting an equal. She beams back, clearly delighted. "Master Rowan," she says warmly, "you couldn't sleep either?" He chuckles, the sound like dry leaves rustling. "Sleep is wasted when the soil is listening." His voice is calm, steady, the kind that could read you your tax bill and still make you feel comforted. The old gardener sets aside his rake and crouches near the glowing sprout, examining the soil with hands that look as though they've turned earth for decades. He presses his palm flat against the ground, then lifts it, showing faint flecks of light clinging to his skin. "Ah," he says, "the old ways still hold." In history, gardeners often straddled the line between laborers and mystics.
Monks in medieval Europe wrote detailed manuals about planting schedules, mixing scripture with advice on when to sow peas. And here's a quirky tidbit. Some Renaissance gardeners swore that singing to beans made them grow faster, though scholars still debate whether that's earnest belief or just lonely farmers inventing karaoke night. The debate lingers, mostly unresolved, like most garden chores. The deer inclines its head toward the gardener, as if recognizing him. Even the dragonling uncurls slightly, curious but not hostile. The jeweled birds give a few approving notes, which might be their version of applause. Clearly, Master Rowan has met this company before. He gestures for you to come closer, and when you do, he points to the soil. The secret, he murmurs, isn't the seed, it's the listening. Too many people plant expecting miracles without giving the earth its say. But if you listen, truly listen, you'll hear what the ground is asking for. You kneel, pressing your hand to the soil. At first, nothing, just dirt. Then, faintly, a thrum. Not loud, not clear, more like the heartbeat of the earth itself, steady and patient. You realize it's been there the whole time, only drowned out by your own noise. The princess watches you with quiet pride, as though she knew you'd hear it eventually. The old gardener just nods, muttering something about good ears, finally. He digs into his satchel and pulls out a handful of herbs, dried, crumbling, but fragrant. He scatters them over the soil, and the scent of rosemary and sage drifts up, sharp against the night air. Old remedies, he says, not for the plants, for us, so we remember to stay humble. Folklorists disagree whether these old herbal rites were practical medicine or symbolic gestures. Some argue they were about aligning humans with the cycles of nature. Others believe it was just superstition, throwing herbs on the ground like confetti and hoping for the best. The debate continues, but in moments like this, watching the seeds glow beneath the soil, you're inclined to think symbolism and reality aren't enemies. They're just different leaves on the same branch. The dragonling yawns smoke in your direction, unimpressed by the philosophy lesson. One jeweled bird mimics the gardener's chuckle, startling itself into silence. Even the deer lowers its head to graze on non-existent grass, perhaps to avoid joining the debate. The old man straightens slowly, joints creaking like old hinges. Then he pats your shoulder, a gesture so ordinary, so grandfatherly, that you nearly forget you're surrounded by mythical creatures. The princess gives his arm a gentle squeeze, gratitude unspoken, but clear. Master Rowan nods once more, then shuffles back toward the ivy arch, disappearing into the night as quietly as he arrived. The garden feels different now, as if his presence stitched it tighter, made it whole. You sit back, soil still warm beneath your hand, the lesson lingering in your chest. And just when you think the night can't get any richer, fireflies begin to gather in strange, deliberate patterns above the hedges, spelling secrets you're not sure you're ready to read. The fireflies hover in deliberate arcs, glowing dots sketching patterns in the air like a patient calligrapher. At first, you think it's random, shapes wobbling in the dark, little insect doodles. But then you notice repetition. Circles overlap with stars, stars fold into spirals, spirals collapse into something that looks suspiciously like directions. The princess tilts her head back, eyes following the glowing script. "They're showing us the way," she whispers, "or at least a way." You squint, trying to trace the shapes. Or, you say cautiously, they're just bugs with an excellent sense of choreography. Somewhere out there, a firefly drill sergeant is shouting orders. She smirks, but doesn't disagree. The dragonling, now wide awake, flaps its stubby wings in excitement, as if itching to chase the glowing dots. The deer snorts softly, unimpressed, though Given it communicates mostly through side-eye, it's hard to tell if that means nonsense or finally. As the fireflies gather tighter, their light illuminates the old hedges that line the garden. Vines curl upward, revealing faint carvings in the stone beneath. Geometric patterns intertwined with symbols that don't belong to any single culture. Greek spirals tangle with Celtic knots. Norse runes intertwine with something that looks oddly like doodles from a distracted monk. Here's the historical fun bit. Fireflies have fascinated humans for centuries. In Japanese folklore, they were thought to be the souls of soldiers, flickering on battlefields. In European tradition, they sometimes marked fairy gatherings, like organic street lamps leading mortals into trouble. Scholars still debate whether these overlapping stories reflect shared ancient roots or just universal awe at bugs with built-in nightlights. The princess brushes moss off the carvings, her fingers pausing at one spiral. "This one points east," she says. And sure enough, the fireflies ripple, their glow stretching toward the shadowed orchard beyond the hedge. You hesitate. So we're just following glowing bugs into the dark? No maps, no GPS, just a million insect flashlights? The dragonling sneezes smoke rings in your face, which feels like its version of "quit whining." Even the jeweled bird trills a sarcastic little note, probably the firefly anthem. The princess laughs softly. Every good story needs a bit of wandering. Besides, she adds, you probably won't survive this if you argue with bugs. The garden gate creaks open as though the fireflies themselves pulled the latch. Cool air slips through, carrying the scent of apples and damp earth. The deer steps forward first, antlers catching stray sparks of light, making it look like a chandelier on legs. Then the dragonling waddles, puffing smoke, clearly determined to lead despite being about the size of a backpack. You sigh, brushing dirt off your knees. "All right," you murmur, "bug GPS it is." Beyond the gate, the orchard stretches in neat rows, moonlight pouring between them. But the deeper you walk, the less it feels like any orchard you've known. The trunks grow gnarled, twisting in ways trees usually avoid unless they've been taking interpretive dance classes. Some branches lean down close, as though eavesdropping on your steps. The fireflies keep their course steady, weaving ahead in bright arcs. Occasionally, they form a familiar symbol again, a spiral, a star, an arrow, reassuring you that no, you're not hallucinating from too much dragon smoke. Folklorists often note that wandering into orchards at night has long been a risky business. In Celtic tales, apples symbolize the otherworld, with groves serving as doorways to hidden realms. Historians still argue whether these orchards were meant as literal places of passage or symbolic landscapes of temptation and transformation. Either way, the orchard always holds more than fruit. The princess moves calmly, her steps sure, as if she's walked this path in her dreams. She hums under her breath, a tune so soft it could be mistaken for the rustle of leaves. The dragonling waddles proudly ahead, chasing a cluster of fireflies and occasionally trying to snap one out of the air, always failing. The jeweled bird perches on your shoulder now, muttering in garbled echoes, like a parrot doing bad impressions of history professors. The deeper you go, the more the orchard glows, not from fireflies, but from the trees themselves. Some of the apples shine faintly, as though lit from within. One glimmers gold, another silver, a third pulsing faintly like a heartbeat. You reach out, but the princess shakes her head gently. "Not yet," she says. "The orchard is watching. We should let it decide what to offer." You drop your hand quickly, pretending you weren't about to pocket a supernatural snack. The deer rolls its eyes, and you can swear it mutters something like, "Tourists." The fireflies surge forward, clustering at the farthest edge of the orchard where the trees grow so close together they form a kind of arch. Beneath it, darkness pools, deeper, thicker, like the start of a cave. The princess looks at you, her face calm but expectant. "Shall we?" And as the fireflies hang in the air like patient ushers, you realize this isn't just another midnight walk. You're about to step somewhere even the soil doesn't hum about.
You duck under the arch of tangled branches, brushing against bark that feels warmer than it should, almost like skin. The fireflies sweep ahead into the darkness, their glow stretching out into what looks like a cave mouth, but smells faintly of blossoms and rain. The air changes instantly, cooler, denser, carrying an echo, as if the orchard has melted into a cavern carved out of silence itself. Your footsteps crunch softly on soil that glitters with mineral flecks, like stardust spilled carelessly across the ground. The princess follows close, her hand grazing the wall as though she's tracing an old memory. The dragonling waddles ahead, its tiny flame-lit breath competing with the fireflies for best cave lantern. The jeweled bird mutters nonsense on your shoulder, probably trying to start a podcast. Then you hear it, a low, vibrating hum, steady and deep. It's not the soil's heartbeat this time. It's coming from the walls themselves. The sound thrums through your chest, like standing next to a bass speaker at a concert, except this one's put on by rocks with excellent acoustics. The princess pauses, listening. The echo chamber, she whispers. This is where voices carry secrets. In history, caves were often sacred spaces. Ancient Greeks believed caves were entrances to the underworld, while Celtic druids thought them womb-like portals to rebirth. Archaeologists still argue whether the echo paintings in prehistoric caves were just decoration or attempts to trap sound itself in stone. Scholars can't agree if the hum you hear now is physics or something older. The deer's hooves click lightly as it enters, the sound ricocheting into dozens of echoes, each one slightly out of sync. The animal snorts nervously, shaking its antlers as if to warn you that sound here has teeth. You experiment, clearing your throat and giving a quick, "Hello?" The cave responds with a chorus of, "Hello, hello, hello," each one stretched and distorted, like a funhouse mirror for your voice. The dragonling tries next, coughing out a smoky squeak. The echo transforms it into a deep, rumbling roar, startling the poor creature so badly it stumbles backward into your leg. The princess laughs, soft and musical. It seems the cave is generous. It gives us back more than we put in. You mutter, "Great, so basically this cave is social media." The jeweled bird immediately repeats, "Social media," in a nasal tone, then cackles like it just roasted you. As you walk deeper, the fireflies arrange themselves again, but this time into the shapes of faces, smiling, frowning, solemn. They hover in clusters along the walls, their light illuminating carvings in the stone. Ancient figures holding tools, seeds, and strange animals with too many wings. Some of the carvings glow faintly, as though dusted with moonlight. The princess touches one of the glowing carvings, a figure of a woman holding a sheaf of wheat in one hand and a dragon curled around her feet. "She gardened in silence," she murmurs, almost to herself. Folklorists often argue over whether figures like these represent actual mythic beings or archetypes woven from human memory. Some claim they're goddesses of fertility, others believe they're forgotten queens mythologized into legends. The debate remains unsettled as the dust clinging to the carvings. You lean in close, tracing the dragon's curling body. The stone feels alive, warm, almost pulsing faintly, as though it resents your skepticism. You quickly pull your hand away, muttering something about how you didn't mean it. The cave hum deepens as if laughing at you. The dragonling, emboldened, presses its snout against the carving. For a moment, nothing happens. Then, with a quiet crack, a small stone fragment breaks off and falls into your palm, light glowing from within like a captured ember. The princess gasps softly. "A token," she says. "The cave doesn't give freely unless it wishes you to carry part of its story." You stare at the glowing fragment, feeling the weight of history, or possibly just geology, warming your hand. The deer nudges you impatiently, as if to say, "Don't drop that, rookie." The humming grows louder, more insistent, like a drumbeat urging you onward. The fireflies surge ahead, pulling the light deeper into the cave until the darkness swallows everything but their glow. You exchange a glance with the princess, her eyes shimmering in the faint light. She nods, calm and steady, though her fingers tighten slightly around the hem of her gown. You take a breath. The cave's hum fills your chest, steady and endless, like a second heartbeat, and with the glowing fragment clutched in your hand, you step further into the darkness, not knowing if the cave will echo you back whole.
The hum thickens into rhythm as you push deeper into the cave, like someone striking an invisible drum far below your feet.
The sound keeps time with your steps until you're no longer sure whether you're following the beat or the beat is following you. The fireflies scatter into twin spirals, twisting together like strands of braided light, drawing you toward an opening ahead. The dragonling waddles eagerly into the glow, squeaking every few steps, as if auditioning to be the drummer's understudy. When the passage widens, you step into a chamber so unexpected it knocks the breath from you. A great underground lake stretches out before you, its surface smooth as glass. The ceiling is high and jagged, but lined with veins of crystal that catch the firefly light and scatter it into 1,000 shimmering reflections. It feels like standing inside a chandelier designed by a dreamer with too much time on their hands. The princess breathes deeply. "The mirror waters," she says, reverent but steady. "They don't show what is. They show what wants to be." You frown at the lake. "Fantastic. A body of water with opinions. Just what we needed." She smiles faintly, but doesn't disagree. The deer edges closer, lowering its head to peer into the water. Its reflection shimmers, then shifts, antlers blossoming into branches heavy with fruit, body cloaked in vines. The animal jerks back, startled, but then relaxes, as though seeing a truth it already suspected. Folklorists have long told of enchanted lakes. In Norse legends, wells of reflection were said to guard wisdom, though who exactly was allowed to drink often caused squabbles. In Irish tales, certain lakes granted visions but demanded offerings first. Scholars still argue whether these waters were metaphorical, representing self-knowledge, or meant literally, like a pre-modern version of a mirror app. The dragonling waddles up and peers in, its reflection showing a massive, regal beast with wings like cathedral arches. It squeaks indignantly at the unfairness of puberty being that far away. The jeweled bird hops onto a stone, leans over, and sees itself, exactly itself. It lets out a triumphant trill, as though announcing it had nothing to prove, thank you very much. When you dare lean closer, the water waits, patient and utterly still. Your reflection shivers, ripples, then reshapes. Not quite you, but a softened version, carrying tools you don't remember picking up. Gardening shears, a trowel of seeds. Your reflection looks calm, competent, the kind of person plants with actually trust with their lives. "See?" the princess murmurs. "The lake doesn't lie. It shows what could bloom in you." You mutter something about already struggling to keep succulents alive, but inside you can't shake the sense of being called out by a puddle with delusions of grandeur. The princess kneels, dipping her hand in the water. The ripples spread outward, the lake responding not with distortion, but with new images, rows of gardens you've never seen, endless fields glowing with flowers that move as if alive. The hum of the cave blends with the soft splash, wrapping the moment in an odd serenity. And then, from the far side of the lake, you see movement, not fireflies, not reflections. Shadows gather, coalescing into shapes that are neither threatening nor familiar. Figures, almost human, but elongated, shimmering as if woven from liquid silver. They hover at the edge of the water, silent, waiting. The dragonling growls faintly, smoke curling from its nostrils. The deer stamps one hoof, though it doesn't retreat. The jeweled bird mutters something approximating, "Uh-oh." The princess's face is calm, but her voice is firm. These are the lake's keepers. They decide what we may take with us. You glance down at the glowing stone fragment in your hand. It pulses faintly, answering the hum of the chamber. You realize that somehow the cave has already given you something, and the lake may want something in return. The shadows ripple like water given form. No words, just expectation. You understand somehow that a choice is coming. And,
Like all good bedtime stories, you realize, choices here are never as simple as yes or no.
The silver figures shift at the lake's edge, rippling like candlelight on water. They lean slightly forward, not hostile, but insistent, their silence somehow louder than any demand. The princess steps closer to you, her gown whispering across the stone floor. "They don't speak," she says softly. "They show. You must answer with what you carry." You glance at your hand, the glowing stone fragment pulsing faintly like it has its own pulse. A warmth creeps up your arm, not painful, just firm, like a reminder that you're holding something that doesn't quite belong to you. You hesitate. "So basically they want me to barter? Like a magical pawn shop?" The jeweled bird on your shoulder squawks, "Pawn shop! Pawn shop!" then bursts into its own cackle, clearly pleased at having found its catchphrase. The princess smothers a laugh. "Not pawn, balance. The keepers won't let us pass unless you give the lake what it asks for." Folklorists have written endlessly about these exchanges with spirits. Some claim they're remnants of ancient rituals of offering, bread, milk, or precious trinkets given to hidden folk in exchange for safe passage. Others argue the stories were morality plays, teaching people not to clutch too tightly to what wasn't theirs. Historians still squabble about whether offerings were spiritual acts or just early forms of toll-paying. The deer steps forward, lowering its head toward the water. The keepers ripple in response, their silver forms bending like reeds in a current. The animal lets a single glowing apple fall from its antlers into the lake. It dissolves instantly, leaving only a shimmer of light. The keepers bow, acknowledging the gift. The dragonling waddles next, puffing a reluctant ball of fire into the water. The lake absorbs it with a hiss, steam rising, the glow spreading across the surface like a smile. The keepers tilt their heads in approval. The jeweled bird hops down dramatically, plucks a single feather and tosses it in. The feather bursts into a tiny flare of colored light before vanishing. The bird squawks proudly, as if it just solved world peace. Now it's your turn. You hold the glowing fragment tightly, suddenly aware that your sweaty palm isn't helping your case. You kneel at the lake's edge, the reflection of yourself shimmering with those tools you don't yet own, those gardens you haven't grown. The keepers lean forward, expectant. "All right, fine. But if I throw this in, and it turns out to be a magical Wi-Fi router, I'm going to regret it." With a careful breath, you release the fragment. It sinks slowly, light streaming upward as it disappears beneath the surface. The hum of the cave deepens, then softens into something like a sigh. The keepers shimmer, then bow in unison, their forms breaking apart into countless sparks of silver light that scatter across the ceiling. The princess smiles, relief softening her features. The way is open. And sure enough, the lake itself begins to shift. The water parts in the center, folding back as though pulled by invisible hands. A glowing path appears, stone rising just enough for you to walk across without wetting your feet. The deer steps forward confidently, antlers glowing faintly. The dragonling waddles after, still looking grumpy about losing its fireball. The jeweled bird flutters ahead, calling "pawn shop" one last time, because it's clearly not letting that joke go. The princess touches your arm. "You gave more than stone," she says gently. "You gave your listening." The path stretches forward, luminous and trembling. You take a breath and follow, each step echoing softly against the chamber walls. The lake closes behind you as you pass, sealing the way back. Ahead, the crystals gleam brighter, pulling you to another chamber. The hum rises again, different this time, sharper, with an edge like a question you're not sure you want answered. And you realize this story is leading you to a place where even the earth itself has secrets it may not wish to tell.
The crystal-lit path narrows into a long corridor where the hum sharpens into something like a whisper. It isn't words exactly, more the sound of someone breathing just behind you when no one is there. You keep walking anyway, partly because the princess strides on with unshaken calm, partly because the dragonling would probably laugh if you turned back. The walls here glitter with veins of quartz and mica catching the firefly light. Patterns emerge in the stone, spirals again, but sharper this time, intersecting lines like maps no cartographer could follow. Every few steps, your own reflection blinks back at you from the crystal surface, warped and multiplied. At one point, you catch sight of yourself with 3 heads, which feels uncomfortably like a Monday Zoom call. The princess runs her fingertips along the walls, pausing at certain symbols etched deep into the rock. "These aren't just carvings," she murmurs. "They're instructions. A language that teaches through silence." You raise an eyebrow. "A silent language carved in walls? Sounds like ancient graffiti with extra steps." The jeweled bird perks up. "Graffiti! Extra steps!" before descending into a wheezy laugh. Even the deer gives a low grunt, which is hard to tell with deer. Historians often note that sacred inscriptions in caves weren't necessarily meant to be read like books. Some believe they were ritual markings guiding initiates through spiritual journeys. Others argue they were mnemonic devices, reminders for oral storytelling. The scholarly fight is ongoing, and no one's winning, except maybe the caves for getting free publicity. The dragonling scampers ahead, its tiny claws clicking against the stone. Suddenly, it stops, sniffing the air. You hear it too. A faint metallic ringing, almost like a bell struck far away. The sound grows clearer as you approach a bend in the corridor. And then, the chamber opens. It is vast, domed, and filled with suspended crystal formations that hang like chandeliers. Each one hums faintly, a different pitch, weaving together into a low, resonant harmony. The whole space feels alive, a cathedral made by the earth itself. The princess inhales deeply. "The chorus hall," she whispers. "Here, the stones remember." You step forward cautiously, the harmony vibrating in your chest. When you speak, just a soft hello. The crystals respond, shifting their tone to echo your voice in layered chords. It's unsettling and beautiful, like being remixed by a choir of rocks. The dragonling lets out a squeak, which the chamber transforms into a majestic trumpet blast. Startled, it tumbles backward into your leg, as if betrayed by geology. The jeweled bird flaps madly, shrieking, "Encore! Encore!" The princess kneels, her palm against the stone floor. The resonance deepens, and faint images ripple across the crystals. Scenes of gardeners bending over soil, of mythical beasts resting in groves, of figures tending sacred orchards. Some are familiar, echoes of stories you've already glimpsed. Others are strange, like drafts of myths that never made it into the final version. Folklorists debate whether such chorus halls were imagined as archives of memory or simply metaphors for the way sound carries in sacred spaces. Some claim the resonance was thought to trap voices, preserving them long after death. Others suggest these myths reflected people's hope that their stories mattered enough to echo forever. The argument continues, echoing just like the chambers themselves. The deer steps carefully among the crystals, its antlers brushing one that rings out like a struck bell. The sound lingers, harmonizing with the rest of the hall, as if the animal has been accepted into the song. The dragonling tries to mimic the gesture, bashing a crystal with its snout. The resulting note is discordant, like a tuba with a cold, and the dragonling sneezes smoke in embarrassment. The princess laughs gently, her voice weaving into the harmony. For a moment,
You hear not just her sound, but yours too, layered together, lifted into something larger. The hall remembers you, just as it remembered those before. But then the tones shift. A darker resonance hums beneath the harmony, a bass so low you feel it in your bones. The crystals dim slightly, as though clouded by shadow. The princess's expression tightens. The chorus hall remembers everything, she says quietly, not only what we wish it to keep. The hum builds, an echo that feels less like memory and more like warning. The jeweled bird mutters, "Pawn shop," very quietly, which is somehow less funny here. You realize the story has turned a page. The cave isn't just guiding you anymore. It's asking what you're prepared to face if it shows you more than songs of gardens and gentle myths.
The low hum keeps pressing at you, like a storm forming underground. You glance toward the princess, who has straightened but not moved. Her face is calm, though her hand remains flat on the stone floor, as if steadying both herself and the hall. The deer shifts uneasily. Its breath puffs white in the air, though the chamber isn't cold. The jeweled bird tucks its head under one wing, mumbling, "Not my circus, not my crystals," while peeking nervously out with one jeweled eye. The dragonling, surprisingly, does not retreat. It waddles forward and plants its tiny claws on a shimmering pillar of quartz. The discordant bass note thickens, then softens, as if considering the creature's audacity. You can feel the vibrations through the soles of your feet, a physical reminder that the cave has opinions. Not every echo here is friendly. Some belong to forgotten quarrels, to voices that wanted their anger remembered. Folklore often warns of memory spaces that keep more than wisdom, wells that store grudges, stones that replay betrayals, forests that whisper lies long after the speakers are gone. In oral traditions, such places stand as metaphors for what communities couldn't resolve, but also couldn't erase. The chorus hall, it seems, is one such archive. You watch the crystals shimmer again. This time the images are not of gentle gardens, but of storm-battered fields, armies clashing, and figures standing apart, refusing to listen. It feels less like watching a story and more like being judged by one. The dragonling squeaks sharply, as if to protest. The sound is small, but the chamber takes it seriously. It spins the squeak into a piercing note that cuts across the darker tones, bright and stubborn, like a flute refusing to be drowned out by drums. Something shifts. The crystals flicker, and for a moment you glimpse a scene of reconciliation. Two figures laying down weapons, a hand extended, not grasped but offered. The bass note softens. The princess lets out a slow breath. The hall is not only warning, it's waiting to see what we choose to do with what we inherit. You almost laugh. So the cave is basically a judgmental aunt? The jeweled bird perks up. "Judgmental aunt! Judgmental aunt!" then snickers at its own echo. The deer stamps once, perhaps in agreement or impatience. Folklore often warns of memory spaces that keep more than wisdom, standing as metaphors for what communities couldn't resolve but also couldn't erase. Historians sometimes describe myths like this as teaching through ordeal. You pass through beauty, but you also face the less comfortable parts of memory. The aim is not despair, but integration, acknowledging that even stories of peace grow out of remembered conflict. The chorus hall begins to dim, their glow drawing inward, as though satisfied for now. The harmony resolves into a softer chord, soothing rather than oppressive. You feel lighter,
as if a weight you didn't realize you were carrying has been gently set down. The dragonling, suddenly very proud of itself, puffs a little smoke ring and looks at you like it deserves a medal. The princess strokes its head. "Small voices can turn heavy songs," she says softly. You take one last look at the chorus hall. The stones hum faintly, no longer pressing. The path ahead glimmers faintly, an exit. The princess rises and begins walking, her cloak trailing gently. The deer follows. The jeweled bird mutters, "No refunds," and flaps after them. You step forward too, carrying not just the calm of the crystals, but also the reminder that memory is rarely simple. Some echoes soothe, some sting, but all of them ask to be heard. The chamber gives a final chord as you leave, soft, low, and strangely kind.
The tunnel out of the chorus hall opens into a cavern unlike any you've seen so far, if you can even call it a cavern. It feels more like the world's strangest greenhouse, a space where natural stone has made peace with cultivated order. Thin shafts of light spill in from fractures high above, painting the floor with golden stripes. Between those rays, rows of soil beds stretch neatly, and in them grow plants you don't immediately recognize. Their leaves shimmer faintly, some translucent, some mottled with colors too bold for any botanical garden you've visited. The princess pauses at the threshold, her face softening. "This is the chamber of seeded time," she says. "Every garden must begin somewhere, even beneath the ground." You step in carefully, inhaling a smell that is equal parts loamy earth and something citrusy, almost like peeled tangerines. The deer lowers its head to sniff at the beds. The jeweled bird, naturally, struts along one row as though conducting a runway show. The dragonling squeaks and promptly begins digging in the dirt, which earns a fond, exasperated sigh from the princess. It's not hard to see why myths often place beginnings underground. Folklorists love to point out that seeds only sprout after enduring darkness, that life insists on pushing upward from hidden places. Ancient agrarian societies leaned on this cycle not only for food, but as a metaphor for renewal. Crops die, communities fracture, seasons turn harsh, and yet each year, something green insists on returning. She kneels beside one of the rows and gently brushes soil from a glowing seed the size of a walnut. "Each of these is a story not yet told," she says. "They wait for hands willing to plant them." The bird scoffs. "Hands! Wings are underappreciated." You crouch, fascinated. The seeds pulse faintly in time with your breath, as though sinking to whoever kneels nearby. One of them responds more strongly, glowing brighter when your shadow passes over it. The princess notices. "It likes you," she says with a small smile. "Perhaps it senses that you carry untold tales of your own." And you can't help but chuckle, thinking, "Great, first the cave judged me, now the vegetables are flirting. What's next? Sentient compost?" Still, you feel drawn to press a finger against the seed's smooth surface. The moment you do, the air ripples. A faint image hovers, a glimpse of you tending a garden, but not alone. Creatures, neighbors, even strangers pausing to help. It's not a prophecy, not exactly, more like a suggestion. What if the seed would like to see attempted? You draw your hand back, slightly unsettled, but also strangely encouraged. Scholars still argue whether stories like this were meant as literal visions or just parables. Did ancient listeners believe such seeds might actually sprout futures? Or were they metaphors for the fragile but powerful act of imagining something better? Either way, you can't shake the warmth in your chest. The dragonling, meanwhile, has buried itself in soil up to its chin,
and looks absurdly pleased as though auditioning for world's cutest potato. The deer huffs, unimpressed. The princess rises, brushing earth from her palms. The seeds remind us that peace begins before anyone sees it grow. Quiet choices, hidden work, things that bloom only after patience. You nod, half distracted by the jeweled bird trying to perch on a sunflower-shaped sprout. So, basically world peace is just gardening with extra paperwork. The princess smiles knowingly, but doesn't argue. She gestures toward a narrow path leading deeper. Come. The seeds cannot be forced, and our journey is not yet over. As you leave, you glance back. The faintly glowing seed you touched continues pulsing, as though promising you'll return someday, or that its story will find you regardless.
The narrow path from the chamber of seeded time curves upward, and for the first time in hours, maybe days, you sense you're climbing toward open air. The stone feels warmer beneath your feet, the ceiling arching higher, and a faint breath of wind brushes your cheek. It carries the unmistakable scent of grass, pine, and something you haven't smelled since stepping into this underworld, starlight itself, if starlight had a fragrance. The princess slows as the path broadens into a vast cavern whose roof has crumbled away. Above stretches a night sky so clear it almost looks painted. Thousands of stars shimmer like scattered seeds, answering the glow of the enchanted garden below. The place is half cave, half meadow, a liminal threshold where earth and sky shake hands. You take a long breath, realizing how strange it feels to see open sky again. The jeweled bird mutters, "Finally, a ceiling upgrade," and flaps upward in mock inspection. The deer steps onto a patch of grass and lowers its head in silent approval, while the dragonling spins in clumsy circles, chasing fireflies as though auditioning for a musical. The princess stands at the center of the meadow and raises her hands slightly, palms open. "This is the chamber of reflection," she says. "Here the stories we've touched weigh themselves against the stars." The grass rustles even though the air is still. You glance down and notice that your shadow wavers oddly, stretching longer, then shorter, like it's being edited in real time. The stars overhead seem to react, brightening whenever the princess speaks, dimming when silence falls. Folklorists often note how ancient myths treated stars not just as celestial bodies, but as archives. Cultures across Europe and the Mediterranean read them as records of heroes, warnings, and promises, glittering footnotes written across the night. Yet scholars can't agree whether people believed the stars actively judged them or merely reflected what was already true. You feel that debate in your bones as the meadow shifts. Your shadow reshapes again, not into your usual outline, but into scenes from the journey. The river's glowing fish, the talking goose still lobbying for retirement benefits, the dragonling puffing its shadows until they softened. Each flickers across the grass, luminous sketches made of starlight. The jeweled bird watches and whistles. Not bad. Needs more sequins, though. The princess glances at you. The stars are asking what you'll carry forward, which memories you'll keep alive, and which quarrels you'll set down. It's an unnerving question, because it isn't asked in words. It hangs in the air, soft but insistent, like when a song pauses right before the final note and dares you to hum along. You think about the seeds, the chorus hall, even the ridiculous goose. Each piece of this journey has asked something small of you: patience, attention, humor in the face of absurdity. Now, under the stars, they all fold into one choice, whether you'll treat those lessons as bedtime curiosities or as roots you actually plant when you wake. The deer lifts its head, eyes reflecting constellations. The dragonling curls against your ankle, warm and sleepy. The jeweled bird, for once, is quiet. The princess lowers her hands. The stars will not command you.
she says softly. They only remind you that forgetting is also a choice. You stand there a while longer, letting the meadow breathe around you. The shadows settle back into ordinary shapes. The stars gleam steadily, not demanding, just present, like a gentle audience waiting to see how the story plays when you leave the stage. At last, the princess turns toward the final passage, a slope leading upward into pale moonlight. "Come," she says, her voice both tender and resolute.
The slope is gentler than you expect, a kind of final kindness after so many twists, shadows, and riddling chambers. Each step upward carries more of the cool night breeze. The air tastes freer, like mint leaves dropped into mountain water. You hear the dragonling huffing happily, the deer's steady hooves against stone, the jeweled bird muttering an improvised ballad about escaping underground rent. When you emerge, it is not onto a battlefield of legend or a throne room of destiny. Instead, you step into a quiet hillside garden. Moonlight spills across terraces of herbs, wildflowers, and fruit trees. Crickets stitch a gentle rhythm. Somewhere, a brook sings to itself, unbothered by your intrusion. The princess walks ahead, her gown brushing softly against the thyme and lavender. She kneels at a plot where the soil has been turned, but nothing yet grows. Her companions gather close, the deer lowering its velvet nose, the bird finally hushed, and the dragonling curling into a glowing coil like a living ember. "This," she says, "is the resting garden. Every tale must return to earth. Every wanderer must return to silence." You stand beside her, and for the first time since you began this journey, you feel no urgency. The world doesn't need saving. No crystal is demanding judgment. The seeds here will wait, patient as the stars above. Folklorists often point out how fairy tales and myths rarely end with final triumph. They end with a return, home, hearth, field, or forest. That cycle reassured listeners that life itself continues, not in grand gestures, but in daily tending. Historians still debate whether that was intentional pedagogy or simply human habit, maybe both. The princess presses her hand to the soil. Peace is not a monument, it is a rhythm. You sink into the grass beside her. The jeweled bird climbs a branch and hums a sleepy tune. The deer lies down, its breath slow and even. The dragonling snores faintly, puffing little smoke rings that rise like lanterns. And for a moment, you realize you've been granted not a crown, not a prophecy, but something rarer, stillness. You close your eyes. The hillside hums with quiet life. Somewhere in the distance, a goose probably still complains, but here, now, nothing demands. The journey folds itself like a blanket, tucking you into its last tender embrace. The hillside garden settles into quiet, and you feel your body answering it, slowing down. Each breath comes longer, each thought dimmer, like fading lanterns along a gentle path. The air is cool, touched with lavender, touched with moonlight, touched with rest. The princess doesn't speak now. She doesn't need to. She has led you as far as she must, and the rest belongs to silence. Her garden, her creatures, the sky overhead, they all seem to lean inward, patient and calm, letting you decide when to drift. The deer exhales deeply and closes its eyes. The jeweled bird's feathers fluff out like a pillow as it dozes. Even the dragonling, ever eager for mischief, has stilled into steady warmth beside you. Their quiet rhythms coax your own body to soften, to release. Above, the stars remain, steady witnesses. Their glow is not insistent, but tender, a reminder that tomorrow they will still be there, waiting. The soil under you is steady too, strong enough to carry dreams without asking questions. Your mind drifts over the journey, the rivers, the crystals, the seeds, the cave of echoes,